No problem, no problem. We probably have like 20 or so cards. Everyone has up to 3 minutes. We don't have to take 3 minutes. I'm going to call 3 people in a row. Just please be ready to speak. Our first speaker is Lunell Siegel, followed by Alan Stone, followed by Joanne Carbana. If Lunell would come forward, and then if the other speakers who I just mentioned could start motioning their way to the front of the room so they can quickly go, and then we can get through this. Hello, how are you today? Let's we want to hear you.
Oh. It seems today that it's fashionable to spit on America and her history. I have a handout showing people stomping on the flag. Another one I emailed you about spray painting and pulling down veterans' monuments, renaming streets, and in the news we've had people unwilling to stand for the national anthem, and so on and so on. You may not think history is on trial here in your chamber, ladies and gentlemen, but some think it is. It may surprise you to know that initiative to purge your 3 street names is part of a bigger national initiative. And all-out campaign is underway to purge American history, with Confederate imagery being easy pickings. After all, there's none still living to defend themselves. Yes, Lee, Forrest, and Hood streets were placed on the list published earlier this year of a Confederate-related imagery of public sites. But don't worry, you're not alone. There are 6 other cities with street names in the crosshairs, as well as 2 county names, Pasco and Lee, 61 total sites in all. Even a tree, the Confederate oak, is in the crosshairs. Of course, the list doesn't offer any suggestions as to who will pay the bill to remove or change the 61 offensive items in Florida and thousands nationwide. But if you do decide to put the debt on trial and start a fundraiser for the Florida Department of Motor Vehicles with the necessity of thousands of address changes by residents, please take into account the following. Number 1, the U.S. Congress investigated Nathan Bedford Forrest and found no evidence of his involvement with the KKK. In fact, Forrest's own bodyguards were men of color. They protected him as he slept. And in fact, he was so beloved by the black residents of his hometown in Memphis that he was the first ever white keynote convention speaker at the predecessor organization of the NAACP. And please don't forget the documentation of the service of thousands of black Southerners, both slave and free, in the Confederate Armed Forces. And I sent you an email today with some pictures of those from Florida. But if you decide to convict one part of history because it is offensive, be prepared to ask to convict and condemn more. For Native American residents may be offended at Custer or Jackson streets. And Georgians may be offended by Sherman Street, and so on and so on and so on. If we look hard enough, probably we'll all find something to be offended about. So will you take the purge of history in your hands, deciding the defense of one group is worthy at any cost to change? But you have a third choice. Let me point into your direction in 1926. That your own ordinance, number 76, adopted the 16th day of June, does in no way mention the specific names of who they were named after.
Can you make this your last sentence?
Absolutely. So it could be Francis Lighthouse Lee, it could be Robin Hood, it could be Forrest Brown, a famous Episcopal bishop.
Perfect.
Who really knows?
Well done.
Thank you.
Alan Stone, General. I love you. That's a great outfit. Thank you. Mr. Alan Stone, nice to see you. Thank you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Commission, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Having served as a city councilman in another community, I'm familiar with the charge that each of you have with your oath and the process that you go through in completing your tasks. I've listened to various other speakers in the past, and I'm of the opinion that I can add very little to what has been said to you in the past. It would appear the issue under consideration is based on societal roles of certain men who have been labeled as racists, that the names of the streets being discussed are directly related to men who are anachronistic symbols of hatred, slavery, and insurrection, with no consideration given to the desire to perpetuate the republic and the rule of law that was put in place by our founding fathers. That being said, I'd like you to contemplate the following. A young man joined the Georgia militia in 1861. He served his state throughout the entire contest. Following Appomattox, he returned to Georgia, where he developed a significant product that granted him considerable wealth. The product continues to this day. However, in today's politically correct environment, this entrepreneur would be labeled a racist because of the stance he took 155 years ago. That being the case, I suspect it would be in order for this community and the rest of the world to consider banning his product or maybe changing the name. Oh, I forgot to mention the man's name is John Pemberton, and the product is Coca-Cola. Contemplating a change in either case, the street names or Coca-Cola, is absolutely absurd. If you change one, you better be prepared to deal with an attempt to alter the course of the other. I yield.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Joanne Carbano, followed by Brian Gordon. If you'd like to come forward, you can have a seat up front, followed by Ron Yanks. Hi, Ms. Carbano. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Nice to see you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. I'm also a councilwoman for Miami-Dade County. I'm coming here to speak to you about the street names because in Dade County, it has caused such a ruckus in my area. When you move, you make that decision. You have to change everything. When you're not the one that's moving and it's being imposed upon you, there's economic conditions that have to be met, especially by the elderly, and the time and consuming. One of the suggestions is your driver's license. You have to, by law, in 10 days, change your driver's license at the pop of $25 apiece. Are your residents that are impacted by these three streets going to be able to afford that, especially if they're on Social Security? That's a big number. Your businesses have to replace their letterhead, their business cards, et cetera, et cetera. Professional licenses, they have to be changed. Anything with your address. Google Maps, Garmin, all of those have to be changed. Then on the heart of the post office, I live in unincorporated Dade County on the edge of Miami Gardens. Because of my zip code and my constituents in my area, we are associated with the city of Miami Gardens and their crime and everything else, which has impacted us with extra fees, et cetera, that we've had to fight for. We've gone to the post office. We had our area designated another name with the help of Commissioner Barbara Jordan, and the post office will not yield. All we want to do is add a name that when you put in our zip code that we're not associated with Miami Gardens. And we've been basically told it's not happening. We even went to the state and we can't get any help. So before you just impose all of these economic conditions on your residents and your businesses, I just want you to consider that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Brian